Hi everyone, welcome to Leisrealtalk. Do you know that tens of millions of Chinese are sitting on a ticking time bomb? What could this time bomb be? The very ground right below them. China's largest cities, Beijing and Shanghai, are sinking. The speed at which this is happening is alarming. People are not only seeing it with their eyes, but they're also living in this nightmare. On July 30th, 2023, a shocking scene unfolded outside a newly opened shopping mall in Beijing. A large section of the sidewalk suddenly collapsed, forming a 6-meter deep pit. Luckily, no one was walking by at the time. Chinese authorities blamed the collapse on heavy rain loosening the roadbed. They said emergency repairs were underway and that there was no need to panic. But Chinese netizens weren't convinced, and many began recalling similar incidents. Back in February 2023, Beijing Daily reported a chilling story. One evening, a man named Dahai got into his SUV. The moment he started the engine, he noticed something was wrong. The front of the car was sinking. At first, he thought the wheel had pressed down on a loose manhole cover. He quickly got out to check, only to see a hole rapidly expanding beneath the front wheel. Within seconds, the ground gave way and his SUV plunged headfirst into a pit. And that's not all. Chinese netizens began digging deeper and shared disturbing images. More giant pits opening up across Beijing. One here, another one there. Official statements echoed the same excuse: loose foundations. But people weren't buying it. How could a capital city, home to China's political elite, be filled with such shoddy infrastructure? Who dared to cut corners in Beijing? And we're not talking about Du-Fu buildings here. A few days later, internet sleuths found the real answer. An article written in 2022 by experts from Wuhan University and the North China University of Technology caught people's attention. Using radar technology called PS-InSAR, the team had monitored Beijing for 10 years and gathered extensive data on ground movement. The results were stunning. Out of Beijing's 15 subway lines, 6 were deforming at a rate of more than 5 millimeters per year. The worst? Line 7, 150 millimeters per year. Line 6, 70 millimeters per year. Line 1, 23 millimeters per year. Beijing was sinking, and still is, steadily, year after year. In just a decade, the city has sunk about 11 centimeters. That's 1 centimeter per year, 5 times faster than the rate of sea level rise. Yes, you heard that right. While sea levels are rising, Beijing is sinking even faster. Look at the spectrum map of Beijing's ground stability. Only the dark blue areas show stable land. Everything else, green, yellow, orange, and red, represents different levels of subsidence. The red zones are the worst. In this image, Jingzhan Township in Chaoyang District stands out in deep red. In 2019 alone, it sank 34 centimeters. That's over a foot. That rate of sinking is truly very alarming. To the east of Beijing flows a river called Chaobay River, which runs through Hebei, Beijing, and Tianjin. It used to be a wide, clear river, more than 20 meters across, and was the second largest river in Beijing, serving as a major source of drinking water. Locals still remember the 1970s vividly, when the riverbanks were lush with green grass and the water was full of life. Fish of all kinds swam freely. Families often went there to fish, relax, and enjoy the scenery. But everything changed starting in the 1990s. The Chaobay River began to shrink. Its width was reduced from over 20 meters to 10, and eventually it narrowed to just a few meters. By 1999, the river had completely dried up. That same year, a major investigative report was released. Experts from the Chinese Academy of Geological Sciences issued a serious warning. Groundwater levels in both the North China Plain and the Songneng Plain were dangerously low. That's where the water from the Chaobay River had gone. It had seeped into the ground as the region's underground water supplies disappeared. China has three major plains: Northeast Plain, North China Plain, and Yangtze River Plain. Together, they cover about 850,000 square kilometers. The Songneng Plain, which is part of the Northeast region, lies at the center of the Songliao Basin and spans about 180,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Cambodia. The North China Plain stretches from the Taihang Mountains in the west to the Yellow Sea and Bohai Sea in the east, and from the Yanshan Mountains in the north to the Dabie Mountains in the south. It spans key provinces like Hebei and Shandong and covers over 300,000 square kilometers, about the size of Italy. Beijing sits on the northern edge of the North China Plain. Together, the Songneng and North China Plains make up over 480,000 square kilometers, more than half of the total area of China's major plains. Losing groundwater in such a vast region is no small problem. Water on Earth is divided into salt water and fresh water, but only 2.5% of the Earth's water is fresh water. The rest is salt water and undrinkable. Even within that 2.5%, most fresh water is locked in glaciers in the Arctic and Antarctic. That means the water humans can actually use is less than 1% of all the water on Earth. So what do we rely on? The real resource we depend on is groundwater, which accounts for 98.5% of all accessible fresh water. How does groundwater work? When it rains, water spreads in several directions. Some flows into rivers and lakes, some is absorbed by plants or animals, some evaporates, and some seeps into the ground. But where does that underground water go? Within the upper 1 to 2 kilometers of the Earth's crust, there are gaps and spaces, whether in loose soil or solid rock. Rainwater trickles into these cracks, but at first it's just temporarily held there. As time passes, water sinks deeper into the earth. Eventually, it reaches a zone where all the gaps in the soil and rock are completely filled with water. This is called the saturated zone, and this is where true groundwater exists. Water in the saturated zone moves slowly, just like an underground river. If a well reaches this zone, it can supply clean, drinkable water. And this zone is what billions of people rely on. Over the past few decades, China has faced rapid groundwater depletion across its three major plains. In the beginning, water for agriculture came from surface sources, rivers and lakes like the Chaobay River. But as China's industrialization boomed and demands for water and food soared, surface water was no longer enough. Farmers turned to groundwater for irrigation. That's when the trouble began. In the North China Plain, groundwater levels started falling at an alarming rate, half to 1 meter per year. When groundwater is pumped up for irrigation, only a small portion is absorbed by crops. The rest evaporates. Very little seeps back into the ground. The scale of water loss has become so massive that it's now visible from space. NASA's GRACE satellite has been tracking this. A 10-year gravity map shows large-scale water loss across China. The Himalayas and the North China Plain appear darkest, signaling the biggest declines. In the Himalayas, it's due to melting glaciers, but in the North China Plain, it's all about disappearing groundwater. Every year, 5.5 billion cubic meters of groundwater was pumped from this region. By 2019, the total had reached 180 billion cubic meters, creating the largest groundwater funnel in the world. A funnel-shaped void now exists beneath the surface. wide at the top, narrow at the bottom. Experts from the Chinese Academy of Geological Sciences call it a giant composite funnel. And what about Beijing? It's sitting right on top of a smaller funnel that's layered over this massive one. With the ground beneath essentially hollowed out, the soil and rocks have lost their support. Cities built above are now resting on fragile foundations, like ticking time bombs. Collapse and sinking can happen at any time. And it's not just Beijing. Tianjin, another major city on the North China Plain, that's only 70 miles away from Beijing, is sinking even faster. 5.22 centimeters per year on average. In the worst year, the city sank almost 80 centimeters. That's more than 2.5 feet. In 2022, the World Economic Forum ranked Tianjin as the fastest sinking city on Earth. Why is it so extreme in Tianjin? A big reason is the Dagang oil field, discovered in 1965 in southern Tianjin. The government pushed to extract oil aggressively, turning Dagang into China's third largest oil field. But decades of drilling and pumping out oil has created underground voids, not just water funnels, but oil holes. Tianjin is now sinking from both above and below. Across the North China Plain, areas that have sunk more than 20 centimeters now cover more than 60,000 square kilometers. And the problem doesn't stop there. Behind the North China Plain, over 100 groundwater funnel zones have formed across China, covering a total of 150,000 square kilometers. Meanwhile, in eastern China, Shanghai faces its own crisis. Buildings have been slowly sinking for years. The historic YMCA building sank 6 centimeters in just over a year recently. Roads in Pudong have collapsed multiple times in a single month. In Lujiazui, the city's financial hub, the land is sinking by 3 centimeters per year. More than 160 square kilometers of the city have already sunk over 5 centimeters. Since 1921, Shanghai's ground level has dropped over 2 meters, tilting the entire city from west to east. And it's all happening while sea levels are rising. For Shanghai, this is potentially catastrophic. The city's average elevation is just 4 meters above sea level. During high tide, the Huangpu River rises 3 meters above sea level. If Shanghai sinks just 1 more meter, large parts of the city will be swallowed by the ocean. Even worse, seawater backflow has become a threat. As land sinks and sea levels rise, seawater seeps inland, contaminating groundwater and soil, making the land unfit for farming and habitation. This has already happened on a large scale in China's coastal provinces. In November 2024, a massive seawater backflow event hit Shanghai, as well as Jiangsu, Zhejiang, Fujian, Guangdong, Jiangxi, and Hainan provinces. Yes, but slowly. Groundwater mainly refills through rainfall, and that takes time. Unfortunately, since the 1990s, rainfalls in the North China Plain has dropped significantly. To store water for the dry seasons, many upstream areas built reservoirs, diverting water away from downstream rivers. As a result, rivers like the Chaobay dried up, turning into empty beds of sand. In the 21st century, China launched the South to North Water Diversion Project, bringing water from the Yangtze and Huaihe River basins to cities like Beijing and Tianjin. Now the Chaobay River has water again, but the groundwater underneath still remains critically low. Fixing these groundwater problems will take decades, and no one knows exactly how the situation will unfold. But one thing is clear: the land underneath millions of people is sinking, and survival now depends not just on engineering, but also on Mother Nature's cooperation. Let's hope the people living on that land can weather the storm and live to see it through. If you enjoyed my program, please like and subscribe. That's all for today. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.